It was the afternoon of September 8th, 1992, in Port Hueneme, California, when a motorist driving down the road noticed a young woman dancing on the center divider. Worried, the man pulled over to help. He tried to talk to her, asking her if she was okay, but she didn't respond. Not a word. Not knowing what else to do, and fearing for her safety, he brought her to the nearby Ventura County Police Station, hoping they could help figure out how to help her. But when police tried to talk to her, they hit the same wall. She didn't seem to be able to speak, didn't seem to know sign language, and wasn't understanding what they were saying to her. The only thing she had on her person was a bank receipt from San Diego, 200 miles away. That was it. The police ultimately had no reason to hold her, so she was let go. The very next day, another police officer saw the woman again, wandering, confused, on a busy street. This time she was taken to a women's shelter where the staff tried to connect with her. But again, she wasn't able to communicate. The shelter was able to bring in a specialist in communication to see if he could break through to her. With the shelter supervisor, they started simple. They wrote down their names and pointed to themselves, then they handed the pen to her. She paused before slowly forming letters with her fingers. When she was finished, the letters spelled Lucxi. When she was shown the name, her face was said to light up, like that name meant something to her. Some believed the name might have Basque roots, a version of Lucxi, with the X pronounced like a CH sound. That could point to Spain or even South America, but no one really knew. Regardless, from that point on, they started calling her Lucxi, and through basic signs and gestures, they continued to learn more about her. They found out that Lucxi was 23 years old, and she said she had taken a plane to California, had a child, and that the child had been taken away from her. After that, she said, she'd been left behind. There were a few other clues. For example, Lucxi didn't know how to cook, but she always knew when it was time to eat. She could brush her hair and clean herself, so she clearly knew how to take care of herself. But not long after arriving at the shelter, Lucxi left, disappearing again. She turned up again a year later in December 1993 in Cotati, California, and again she was brought to authorities. This time, however, doctors were able to determine Lucxi had the mental age of a 9-year-old. But soon after, she vanished again. Over the years, she would resurface from time to time, but never staying in one place for long. The last confirmed sighting came in May 2014 in Santa Paula, California. No missing person report ever matched. No family came forward. The name Lucxi never led anywhere. She remains a complete mystery, a woman with no past, lost somewhere in the cracks of the system. From the start, life seemed just a little harder for Gordon Thomas Page Jr. than it was for other kids. He was a big kid, at least for his age, slow, awkward, and clumsy. School subjects like basic math for Gordon was a struggle. But behind all that was something extraordinary. Gordon had a mind like a steel trap, at least when it came to baseball. He memorized batting averages like most people know the days of the week. Gordon rattled off stats, player names, and positions of every team, flawlessly memorized from the baseball card collection he always kept close. By June of 1981, he graduated high school and got a job at a local grocery store. And though he worked hard, he struggled with customers. Conversations didn't come easy to Gordon, and eventually, they let him go because of it. His parents, Gordon Sr. and Linda, were growing more concerned for their son's future. They met with social workers. Doctors ran tests. The diagnosis was ultimately schizophrenia. It was recommended that Gordon move into a group home where he'd be supervised and medicated. The drugs they gave him, powerful antipsychotics, caused serious side effects. And not just psychological, but physical too. They left Gordon confused, dull, and unsteady. In September of 1989, his family moved to Florida, and Gordon stayed behind in Michigan. He'd been accepted into a group home in Grand Rapids earlier that year and wanted to stay put. Then, on November 29, 1989, things began to change. That morning, a workman parked his truck in the group home driveway. Keys in the ignition, engine running. Gordon, despite being heavily medicated, got in and drove away. He didn't make it far. Right down the road, he crashed the truck. But he didn't stick around. Instead, he got out and kept walking. A few hours later, someone found him at a local elementary school. He had wandered into a classroom and was trying to teach the class. After the incident, Gordon was placed in a county hospital for evaluation. That's where he met a psychiatric social worker who offered a new perspective. Gordon, he said, wasn't schizophrenic. He was highly functioning autistic. With this new understanding, Gordon's parents found a different home for him, also in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that specialized in autism care. It seemed like the right place, maybe the first one that truly fit. But there was a condition. No visits for the first 2 months. They wanted Gordon to settle in without outside influence. It wasn't easy, but his parents agreed. And so, on May 22nd, 1991, Gordon Sr. and Linda said goodbye. As his father turned to leave, Gordon Jr. made one last attempt, rushing to the van, trying to open the locked door. He wanted to go home with his parents, but the door stayed shut. 6 days later, in the early hours of May 27th, 1991, a staff member making rounds discovered something chilling. Gordon was gone. He'd escaped through a window. No one had seen him leave. No one knew where he'd gone. An hour later, a fireman reported seeing a man matching Gordon's description hitchhiking along Interstate 96. A full-scale search followed, but turned up nothing. Then, 6 weeks later, a strange clue was found. Under an overpass near the ramps for both Chicago and Detroit, someone found a small collection of baseball cards. They were Gordon's. 3 of them, his favorites, had been carefully separated from the rest. To his family, it was more than just a clue. It was a message. Proof he had been there. A breadcrumb left behind. They believe he's still out there, alive. Possibly in a hospital somewhere, unknown, unrecognized. A John Doe. But investigators aren't so sure. Many believe Gordon passed away not long after he disappeared. More than 3 decades later, his family is still holding out hope that one day, Gordon Page Jr. will find his way home. On August 10, 1993, deep in the Redwood Forest, just east of Mendocino, California, a strange scene sat quietly beneath the trees. A red Toyota Tercel was stuck in the mud near a shallow creek. A car jack was left by the front tire. The radio had been torn from the dashboard. In the back seat were neatly folded wet clothes, a bra, panties, a wallet, and a driver's license. There were smears of blood on the front seat, shredded identification papers, and torn-up photographs scattered nearby. The ID led investigators to Kristi Krebs. Kristi was a 22-year-old aspiring chef with 2 restaurant jobs in Fort Bragg, just 7 miles from where her car was found. She lived with her parents and 2 younger brothers, and they were a tight-knit family. Unfortunately for them, this scene felt all too familiar. A few years earlier, shortly after graduating high school, Kristi was working hard at her job at Round Table Pizza. While working her shift on April 30th, 1990, Kristi was said to be euphoric, almost detached from reality. She was always cheerful, always dependable, but something else was happening beneath the surface. Unknown to her family at the time, Kristi had developed a deep, unshakable obsession with a married coworker. She imagined a future that didn't exist, fantasized about a wedding, about children. After her shift, she got in her car and drove for hours, winding through the dark roads of the Redwood Forest. Eventually, the car got stuck in the mud. Kristi tried to free it by gunning the engine over and over until it overheated, with the car eventually catching fire. By the time it was discovered, the interior was completely destroyed. It was a bizarre and freak accident, almost like something out of a movie. But for Kristi, it seemed to be the trigger for a complete psychological breakdown. The morning after Kristi's car was found, a strange sight caught the attention of railroad workers along the Skunk train tracks, 13 miles south of Fort Bragg. A young woman, dazed and disoriented, was stumbling through the trees when one of the workers recognized her and called her parents. Bob and Susan Krebs raced to the scene to find Kristi, who at first glance seemed okay. But as they drove her back into town, something wasn't right. Kristi started chanting, patting herself, and muttering things that didn't make sense. They took her straight to the hospital. In the exam room, she continued acting erratic and disconnected from reality. For an entire week, Kristi was almost completely incoherent. And for more than a month, she had no idea who she was, or who anyone else was. At first, doctors suspected an unusual or synthetic substance she had taken, but the tests came back clean. There was nothing in her system. Over the next few months, Kristi was hospitalized 4 separate times. Each visit brought new questions and few answers. Eventually, doctors made a diagnosis. Kristi had suffered a psychotic break that had been brought on by trauma. It explained the memory loss, the confusion, the erratic behavior. Her parents feared she might never come back from it. But slowly, through therapy, medication, and support, she started to improve. Her memories returned. Her behavior stabilized. And after 6 long months, Kristi was released from the hospital. Her therapist suggested she ease back into the work world, at least part-time to start, just 20 hours a week. Kristi took her recovery seriously. She landed a job and did well. In fact, she was thriving. Soon she picked up a second job at a local Burger King. Both employers began calling her in more and more, and for the first time in years it looked like Kristi had found her footing again. But that hope wouldn't last. According to her father, Kristi's life had become a whirlwind. She was working 5, sometimes 6 hours at each of her 2 jobs, often putting in 12-hour days. In between shifts, she was going to the health club. Kristi was pushing herself, sleeping less, always trying to stay busy, and by doing so, she believed she could stay in control. 3 years passed since her breakdown, and while everything looked great on the surface, her parents were growing uneasy. To them, Kristi's breakneck pace reminded them of a pattern, one they'd seen before. They voiced their concerns, but Kristi insisted she was fine. Then came the night of August 9th, 1993. At Round Table Pizza, her manager noticed something unusual. Kristi was in a strangely good mood, extremely upbeat. He asked her why she was so happy, and her reply was cryptic. "It's not what you think." At around 10 p.m., Kristi clocked out and told coworkers she was heading home. But she didn't go home. She was next seen in the parking lot of McCarricher State Park, north of Fort Bragg. A park ranger spoke to her just before closing time. She said she was fine, just relaxing after work. He would be the last person to ever speak to Kristi Krebs. After that, she left the park and drove south, right through Fort Bragg and into the dark heart of Redwood Forest. Somewhere off a dirt road, she got stuck in the mud again, almost the exact same spot where her previous breakdown had occurred 3 years earlier. This time, she gunned the engine until 2 of the tires blew. Her father believes that moment, stuck in the mud, deep in the woods, triggered something inside her. A flashback to 3 years prior, a second psychotic break. She may have panicked and wandered into a creek, trying to make sense of the surreal déjà vu playing out around her. Eventually, she returned to her car, took off her wet work clothes and changed into gym clothes she always carried. Then she opened her wallet, tore up photos of her family and friends, and scattered them around the car in the midst of her breakdown. While there have been credible sightings and reports of Kristi throughout the years, as of 2025, Kristi Krebs remains missing, and her disappearance still unsolved. Selena Edon was born on March 17, 1962, and by all accounts, she was a remarkable child. In high school, she wasn't just popular, she was a leader. She was student body president, senior class president, and she always marched to her own beat. After graduation in 1980, she made an unexpected move. She dropped out of college and joined the Air Force. Not long after, she left the military and became a journeyman construction worker in San Francisco. She joined the Teamsters, bought herself a motorcycle, and carved out a life on her own terms. Her mother, Clarissa, described her as brave and funny. But everything changed on November 29, 1989. That day, Selena was heading home from a union hall in downtown San Francisco. As she rode her motorcycle through the city streets, a pickup truck made a sudden left turn in front of her. She didn't have time to react. The collision sent her flying onto the pavement. Emergency responders rushed her to the hospital, but with her belongings scattered in the chaos, she was admitted as a Jane Doe. 7 long days would pass before her family, her brother Dion, and mother Clarissa were finally located in San Diego. By then, Selena was in a coma, having suffered extensive brain damage. She remained unconscious for 6 weeks, and when she finally awoke, the road ahead would be anything but easy. Selena remembered her family, but much of her past was gone. Her best friend Lori said the accident changed everything. It had stripped her of her personality. She was like a child again. So many of the things she had learned were simply gone. Physically, the damage was devastating. Her left thigh had been crushed. Her left eye was permanently damaged. She experienced near-constant headaches. And worst of all, a traumatic brain injury had caused dangerous fluid to collect around her brain. But even after all that, Selena did what she'd always done. She fought. She dove headfirst into an exhausting physical therapy regimen, pushing her body and her mind to recover. Selena's mother says she was a tough patient, the kind you have to slow down. Even when she could barely stand, she wanted to walk. Even when her body wasn't ready, she insisted she was. It was like she was in a race, rushing to return to the life she once knew. But despite her determination, there were still so many things she just couldn't do. Her brother Dion believed the hardest part for her was accepting that she wasn't well yet. 2 months after the accident, Dion brought Selena back home to San Diego. She moved in with her mom, continuing her recovery through outpatient therapy. But her mother began to notice something wasn't right. The confusion was getting worse. Clarissa says that as a mother, she could see things the doctors didn't. Changes in Selena's personality, unexplained mood swings. And some days she could be downright mean. Clarissa came to recognize the pattern of anger followed by the headaches. But over time, the headaches gave way to something more troubling: a deep, persistent confusion. Selena would be talking to someone on the phone, hang up, and then ask her mother who she was just talking to. Anytime Selena forgot something, it made her furious. Not at anyone else, but at herself. And slowly her frustration turned into a kind of desperation. She wanted to live on her own and to reclaim her independence. With her recovery stalled, Selena made a bold decision. In May of 1990, she returned to San Francisco, hoping that being back in familiar surroundings might help her heal. Her friend Lori remembers that Selena seemed happy to be back, happy to be near her old friends. But Lori could see what others may have missed. Selena wasn't well. She was forgetful, unaware of basic things. And Lori felt strongly that Selena should not have been living on her own. Selena stayed in the habit of calling her mother, never going too long without checking in. Until one day in October of 1990, almost a year after the accident, Selena's mom received a call she would never forget. Selena told her mother she was going away for a while, that she had met someone who promised to be kind. Clarissa pleaded with her to come home, but Selena said, "Don't worry if you don't hear from me in a month or two. I'll be calling you soon." And then she hung up. That was the last time Clarissa ever heard her daughter's voice. On New Year's Eve, 1991, over a year after Selena disappeared, Lori's answering machine picked up a call. There was a voice on the tape. It was garbled, hard to understand, but unmistakably it was Selena. That was the last time anyone heard from her. On the morning of September 6th, 1988, 73-year-old Mae Huff vanished without a word and without a trace, after having breakfast at the Welcome Haven nursing home in Winchester, Virginia. She had only been living at the facility for about 3 months. Staff described her as gentle, quiet, and was prone to wandering. It was a known issue, something they monitored carefully. Because of her fragile condition, Lily was usually restrained to a wheelchair as a safety precaution. She rarely moved around unattended. That morning, Lily sat waiting patiently in the hallway. An aide was supposed to give her a bath. But in those few unsupervised minutes, Lily slipped away. She exited through the dining room's patio door, the only exit in the entire facility not wired with an alarm. No one saw her leave. No one noticed she was gone until it was too late. Within hours, staff realized Lily was missing. A full-scale search was launched involving local police, volunteers, and search dogs. For 5 days, crews scoured the grounds around the nursing home, the woods, and nearby neighborhoods. They checked hospitals, questioned passersby, and followed up on every lead. But they found nothing. No clothing, no footprints, no sign of struggle. It was as if Mae Huff had simply walked out of the world. To this day, no one knows what happened to her.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.